Hey gaming fans, this is Chris Bolts, and I'm coming in with a video on recent events going on with Ghost of Yotei. Now, this is a trailer of Ghost of Yotei playing in the background, and let me just say up front, I have no intention of playing Ghost of Yotei in any instance, and it has nothing to do with any of the recent events that's been going on with this game, specifically a certain director that came out and said some really nasty things about the late Charlie Kirk. No, the reason why I am not interested in playing Ghost of Yotei is because I was totally wed to the story of Jin Sakai from the first game, Ghost of Tsushima. That game was such a beautiful game. It ended with us not knowing what was going to be going on with Jin Sakai, because he had, if you are familiar with Ghost of Tsushima, you know that he had betrayed his entire honor and code as a samurai to take on the Mongolian army and to push them out of Japan. It ends with him basically not knowing which direction he is going to go from there forward. But Sucker Punch, instead of going on and finishing that story, they decided to cut that out and focus on this new character they created, this woman named Atsu, and go in the direction of a revenge story, which, if that sounds familiar, then you have a very good understanding about what types of stories Sony is telling, because wasn't the entire point of Last of Us Part 2 a revenge story? That is absolutely correct. And the similarities between Sucker Punch's Ghost of Yotei and Naughty Dog's Last of Us Part 2 are pretty similar in the fact that they have this woman who is basically Butch, and we all know that Ellie is now Butch, and you're following these characters that you really don't care about and you really don't like, and they tell the exact same story. But going back to Jin Sakai, we're going to go back over here and let's go ahead and turn that off for Ghost of Tsushima. I was watching Endymion's video earlier, and he actually took out the way that Sucker Punch decided to go ahead and finish Jin Sakai's story. And for me, it was just a good amount of disrespect that Sucker Punch and Sony did to their own character. Now, I shouldn't say Sony, because when Sony Japan caught wind of the fact that Sucker Punch decided to switch from finishing Jin Sakai's story to telling this story about this character named Atsu, they were just as surprised and caught off guard as the rest of the fan base was. And if there's any type of fan out there that's going to sit there and try to say that, oh, Ghost of Jin Sakai's story is finished because Sucker Punch said so, you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem here, because you know it's a lie that Sucker Punch said that Jin Sakai's story was finished. They decided to go ahead and change their perspective and focus on this character, Atsu. But let me go ahead and play this particular portion of Endymion's video. And if you want to watch Endymion's video without my commentary, I will link it in the description. But just look at this about how Sucker Punch just treated their own character before they decided to go ahead and force you to play as Atsu.
Long ago, the Mongol horde set its eyes upon a small Japanese island. Although greatly outnumbered, a band of brave samurai rode out to face their invaders. The samurai were annihilated, but one fallen warrior rose from the ashes and single-handedly pushed back the Mongols, armed with his katana, the Storm Blade. He cast aside the way of the samurai and adopted what we now call the way of the shinobi. With the Storm Blade in hand and the howling winds at his back, the warrior defeated the Mongols and freed his home. But he also broke the very code that forged him, making him a wanted man by his own people. The samurai, who was no longer a samurai, had no choice but to flee his home, never to be seen again. No one knows where he went. However, Some say he spent his final days here in his home.
As you saw.
Now, if you want to go and watch the full video for Endymion, I will, once again, link it in the description. Endymion goes on to make a really good comparison of the story of Jin Sakai to that of the story of Luke Skywalker, except, and if you guys know Luke Skywalker, he's from the Star Wars original trilogy. He goes on to become a Jedi and fight against the Sith and his father, Darth Vader. Jin Sakai's story is the complete inverse of that. This man had a code that he used to live by, the samurai code, but he cast that all aside and started using so many different types of underhanded tactics in order to fight the Mongols. And he had a very big struggle between himself and his uncle, who was very mad that he decided to cast away all of his code, his honor, his heritage. And they had a very intense battle at the end of it. It's very similar to that between Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, except in this case here, Jin Sakai decides to go ahead and go further and further into the dark side, if you will. And then it ends with him, with us not knowing exactly what's going to go on. And you saw how Sucker Punch handled it. Oh, he just went to Ezo and that's that. But this could have been a really good starting point to tell a story about how Jin Sakai had built up an entire clan of ghosts who not only fought against the Mongols at that time period, but it continued going into the future, creating new ghosts that would also fight against the injustices that many of the Japanese shoguns and warlords at the time had foisted on their own people. That's a better story than us getting another revenge tale, an angry woman revenge tale. We've had several angry women revenge tales being told. We got this game right here, and we have the game of Assassin's Creed Shadows Now Away, who also had a revenge tale. Ironically, both of those had their families destroyed by warring clans, and then they decided to go ahead and take revenge out. We got the story of Last of Us Part 2, where Ellie goes on a revenge tour. And then just going outside of video games, we have the story of stuff like Blue-Eyed Samurai, which is another female revenge tale where a woman becomes a samurai to train to go and fight against white foreigners who came into the country, and she wants to go ahead and fight against them. These types of stories are complete and utter messes, if you will, and they're absolutely boring. And that brings me to the entire purpose of this video, actually. It's not really to sit there and rip on Ghost of Yotei or anything like that. It's actually to sit here and respond to this article from IGN of all places. And you see from the headline right there, I'm getting bored of every PlayStation game telling the same story. I'm glad someone else noticed this other than myself. The first party games for this current generation of PlayStation gaming, they have told utterly boring derivative stories. You see right here, he's starting off with God of War Ragnarok. God of War Ragnarok was an utter disappointment in my view. I know a lot of people out there like to say that God of War Ragnarok was a really good game, but me personally, I think it was just more of the same old from God of War 2018. Didn't really advance the story, if you will, in my opinion. And on top of that, it played in some tired tropes that we have gotten used to, such as the overarching bad guy of the entire game is an old white guy who just goes about trying to destroy everything. Notice that in most of the first party games from Sony, the bad guy is a white guy. So I'm glad I'm not the only one that notices. Let me go ahead and blow this video out, and I'm gonna go ahead and play this, and we'll see what this videographer or whoever the speaker is going to say about this particular game. And I think his name is Simon Cardy. So let's go ahead and play this video, And by the way, make sure you guys do like, share, subscribe, turn on the post notifications if you like this kind of content. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video.
I'm a huge fan of PlayStation's first-party offerings. They've come to embody the sort of cinematic adventures I've always looked for when sitting down with a controller in my hand, feeling like genuine blockbuster events meant to be savoured. But where in the past this brand of glossy storytelling felt like new ground being trodden, I can't help but feel that recently it's become the well-worn road. It's not just that all of PlayStation's major releases adhere to the now trademarked third-person cinematic stylings. It's that the stable of developers has become seemingly obsessed with stories that explore the exact same themes, grief and revenge. And I'm starting to get a little tired of it. As a rule, these games are all impeccably well made, but I'm starting to miss that era when PlayStation's range felt wider and things were a little bit more fun.
And by the way, even though I do like Ghost of Tsushima, it did start off as a revenge tale. Gensakai wanted to get revenge against the Mongols because of what they did to his clan. But over the time of that game, he started becoming more and more detached from the original reason why he wanted to fight against the Mongols, and it just turned into sheer hatred for the Mongolians. And he just wanted them out of Japan. But it did start off as a revenge story, so that's a recurring theme through a lot of these games that have been coming out from Sony. But let's go ahead and continue with this video here. And once again, the guy's name is Simon Cardy.
The realization that so many PlayStation games have explored the same grim story themes struck me when playing through Sucker Punch's new Ghost of Yotei. While I thoroughly enjoyed it and admire its consistently exciting approach to combat and genuine sense of discovery it creates for exploration, I couldn't help but feel I'd been told its story before. As Atsu, you're tasked with avenging the death of your parents on a blood-soaked journey across 17th century Japan, as you hunt down each of the Yotei 6. Not only is this tale unfortunately close to the plot of Assassin's Creed Shadows, which I also played to completion earlier this year, but it's the same combination of fiery revenge arc, crossed with meditations on what it is to grieve, that has become something of a hallmark for PlayStation Studios in recent years.
I'm sorry it came to this. Little wolf.
2019's The Last of Us Part 2 is an obvious trailblazer, with Ellie's dark descent into a rage-filled embodiment of revenge coming as a result of the death of her father figure Joel. That, of course, was the sequel to the 2013 original that explored how Joel struggled to cope with the death of his own daughter. At the time, The Last of Us was seen as fueling a wave of sad dad games, including 2018's God of War. But in hindsight, these were just the building blocks for PlayStation's preoccupation with grief.
Find your way home.
Exactly. That is exactly correct. A lot of these games was just dealing with grief. And the original God of War, the God of War 2018 and Ragnarok, they have nothing on the original God of War games. I'd much rather play as an angry ass Kratos than a Kratos that is just grief stricken and is worn, is tired, and basically wants to just be left alone. I don't want to play as that Kratos. I want him to go back to being the angry Kratos that was doing all kinds of crazy ass combos, that was tearing off the heads of gods and beating the shit out of his father Zeus. That's the God of War we want to play as. And then going back to the earlier games that they were showing, just notice again, once again, Atsu, Naoe, Ellie, they were all angry butch women. And I know some people will come in and say, well, Atsu wasn't really butch or anything like that. But if you go and watch Endymion's video, he actually has information about the ending of that game that heavily implies that Atsu is butch. And all those types of games are just utterly boring. And I know he was saying that the combat in Ghost of Yotei was pretty good, but going back and once again looking at Endymion's video, And you can also go ahead and look at other people's videos that played this game as well. I was in the midst of watching a review of this game, and he was saying the same exact thing about the combat with regards to Ghost of Yotei. They lock you into certain types of weapons that you must go ahead and use in order to go ahead and defeat an enemy as a counter. It's from Griffin Gaming. I got to go back and finish watching that one, but I wanted to go ahead and make this video. But let's go ahead and continue with Simon Cardy and let him go ahead and go have his say.
You are free.
2022's God of War Ragnarok is a story fueled by the loss of mothers and sons and the anger that comes with them. Insomniac's Spider-Man series follows both Peter Parker and Miles Morales as they attempt to overcome supervillain threats, as well as wrestle with their demons stemming from dead parental figures.
She never thought about herself, even when she was struggling to breathe.
2020's Returnal is a looping sci-fi nightmare born out of the protagonist Celine's familial grief-related trauma. And then there's 2025's other big PlayStation exclusive Death Stranding 2 on the Beach, which may not technically be a first-party game, but certainly is a verifiable feast of maternal and paternal anguish. Don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of all the games listed above, each singular in its depictions of characters and each offering wildly different gameplay experiences. But when viewed as a whole, it's easy to hear that their stories are all being sung from the same hymn sheet. Familial grief is at the centre of all of these stories, and while I certainly feel that mature themes have a place in games, it is all starting to feel like I'm getting hit around the head with the same ideas at this point. The cycle of violence is in very real danger of being...
And by the way, this theme that this author, Simon Cardy, has seen throughout all of these games, you can also expand it to a lot of the entertainment that you're watching in movies and television. I was just thinking about one of the biggest ones from Disney Marvel, which is WandaVision. The entire theme of that show was grief. Wanda experiencing grief by the fact that her boyfriend, I guess, because I don't think they were married, Vision, was destroyed because he actually was an android, and then she created herself 2 imaginary kids, and they were taken away, and she wanted to somehow bring them back. That was all focused on grief. So it's almost like that's the only theme that they know how to handle. It was again also appeared in Disney Star Wars at The Acolyte. That was also a recurring theme in that god-awful show. It's like these creatives do not have, and I use the word creatives loosely, they have no other way of telling a story other than focusing on grief and revenge. And over time, those types of themes are going to get boring.
Becoming a loop of diminishing returns.
You gutted my father.
He defied Lord Saito.
Then you tried to burn me alive.
Of course, it's true that not every PS5 game follows this pattern. Astrobot isn't an exploration of generational trauma in deep space, but you catch my drift. I think that's incidentally what I enjoyed so much about Team Asobi's Ode to PlayStation of old. With its joy and colour standing out from the otherwise morose crowd. It felt like a rarity, but it never used to be this way. The PS3 gave us Naughty Dog's Uncharted era, which, although it eventually ventured into more melancholic territory in A Thief's End, firmly planted its flag in themes of adventure with a tone ripped from the pages of Pulp Fiction. I've always had a soft spot for Insomniac's Resistance and its World War II/sci-fi warfare mashup, as well as Little Big Planet, which, all the way at the other end of the tonal spectrum, celebrated creativity and community.
Welcome to Bunkum Chummy Chum Chum, where the sky is strewn with circling clouds of imagination.
Yes, these games all contain varying levels of character nuances, but were all fundamentally about different things. Treasure hunting, alien invasions, and personal expression. They weren't all trying to serve the same story. And I can't help but feel that if a new Jak and Daxter game were to come out today, it would be about an Otzel's thirst for revenge against the killers of his blonde-haired friend.
Hang on
on, Dax. It's gonna be close.
I hope that future PlayStation exclusives can look to this more varied, interesting past for inspiration, even when choosing to tackle more serious subject matters. Team Ico's PS2 classic Shadow of the Colossus took on a mournful tone, but found something truly unique and poignant within it, at a time when such ideas were far less common in games. It stands as a unique masterpiece to this day, telling its tale through vagaries and minimal cutscenes, a far cry from the trademark cinematic style we now expect of PlayStation games. What we didn't have back in the mid-2000s were 5 more PS2 releases that took its exact contemplations on love and loss and told the same story in a different wrapping. Every time you played something new from Sony Studios on the now 25-year-old console, it felt like a brand new experiment with a different story to tell, not just a variation on a theme. That brings me back to Ghost of Yotei, a game that is superior to its predecessor in almost every aspect, barring its central story.
My name.
I will take issue with that, or rather umbrage. I don't think Ghost of Yotei is superior to Ghost of Tsushima in any way, shape, or form. I saw the gameplay of that, and you just call that right there where they had like the freeze frame type when she strikes. That is uprooted directly from Ghost of Tsushima. She also goes into a bamboo bath. It's almost the exact same animations that Jin Sakai has to go through. You got to cut bamboo, which is something that Jin Sakai also has to do. You got the rope grappling hook, which is something that Jin Sakai also has. This entire game is pretty much just Ghost of Tsushima, and the only thing they switched was they switched the character, the protagonist, from a male to female, and then they switched the enemy from Mongols to Japanese. But the entire setting and aesthetic of the game is exactly like Ghost of Tsushima. It has done nothing to improve on that game. Now, I'm not sitting there saying that there might be some minor improvements, but when I use the word improve, I'm talking about it didn't do anything that really sets itself apart from Ghost of Tsushima. And as the guy said, the story is far superior in Ghost of Tsushima than it is in Ghost of Yotei. And I will dare say that the protagonist, Jin Sakai, is far superior to Atsu, who is just another angry butch woman going out on revenge. Who wants to play that? Who wants to play a game like that? I surely don't. I've had my fill of playing games that star angry butch women. There's no variety in the storytelling. Let me go ahead and let this guy finish up, and then we'll go ahead and close it out.
Is Atsu.
While I connect to Atsu more than I ever did Jin Sakai, she's a much warmer presence to spend a few dozen hours with. Ghost of Tsushima's narrative explores different, fresher ground. The story balances the personal struggles of Jin against the backdrop of an invasion of a nation, with themes of honor, betrayal, and belonging striking a chord and making it stand out when it arrived hot on the heels of The Last of Us Part 2 in 2020, before grief seemingly took hold of every Sony storyteller.
By the way, going back to 2020, I think many people are still pissed off at the Game Awards. Gamers everywhere chose Ghost of Tsushima as the game of the year over The Last of Us Part 2, because Last of Us Part 2, that game completely destroyed Joel. It was a bait and switch where you were made to think that you would still be playing very much of the game as Joel, but in reality, he gets killed early in the game very unceremoniously, very disrespectfully, if you will, so that you can be forced to play as Ellie and then be forced to play as Abby. Nobody liked that. And to this day, nobody wants to even talk about Last of Us Part 2, but we still talk about Ghost of Tsushima. That's how much of an impact this game has had on the gaming community. Jin Sakai is a compelling character. And I don't understand how this guy is saying that he had a bigger connection with Atsu than with Jin Sakai. Like, what connection did you really have with Atsu? He really didn't say, oh, she's a warmer presence and all that. Well, I guess that's because she's probably a woman. But that's the thing. We weren't supposed to get a warmer presence with Jin Sakai. We were supposed to go along with this man who, after suffering much against the hands of the Mongolians, we were to go ahead and see how far this man was willing to go to achieve his goal. Most men can relate to that. How far will we be willing to go to protect what we love and hold dear? Maybe this guy's just a beta male, but I don't know. But let's go ahead and finish this out.
Perhaps PlayStation's interest in grief is a reflection of the state of the world, though. When viewed through the lens of when PS5 exclusives like Ghost of Yotei and Death Stranding were being written, that melancholy is somewhat understandable. The COVID pandemic inarguably took hold of our planet in the years 2020 and 2021. And as such, themes surrounding unexpected loss and mass trauma would no doubt have been at the forefront of many minds. It will therefore be intriguing to see if this pattern will continue much further then, now that the world has somewhat settled back into what it looked like beforehand. Will the stories being told in projects that began production post-2022 mirror a different state of the planet, or continue to look inside ourselves at our darkest moments? These are, of course, all valid tales to tell, and I'm a huge proponent of art being reflections of those creating it, but I can't help but wish for a little more variety going forward.
I will find every last member of the Yotei 6. And I will bring you peace.
There's a reason to be hopeful and skeptical, considering what Sony has coming up next. Insomniac's Wolverine looks to be delivering on all of the gore and decapitation you'd hope to see, but will that mature rating be reflected in its themes?
Death's always waiting.
Logan is certainly a character consumed by a lust for revenge. Will that see us taken down a familiar path of burying past demons through ultra-violence? Or will we get an altogether different story that taps into a different part of his psyche? James Mangold's Logan already told us a tale that would have slotted nicely into PlayStation's sad dad canon, as X-23 tapped into the softer side of his adamantium body. So I do hope we don't just get a rerun of that idea here. We also know that Saros is on the way from Housemarque in March, and it certainly looked impressive in the most recent State of Play stream. As for Naughty Dog, the ground zero of this long-running era of grief, we know that the studio will be taking on the sci-fi realm next with Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. Its first trailer was promising, delivering a more fun-filled tone than we'd ever dream of seeing from The Last of Us. Of course, we've barely scratched the surface here, but it would be fantastic to see Naughty Dog rediscovering some of that Uncharted levity here. Both of these upcoming PS5 games, incidentally, are stories about people investigating lost off-world colonies. I hope for my sake that they find wildly different stories to tell on each of them, rather than discover reminders of the grief they've left behind.
But after every death, I always come back stronger.
For more on Ghost of Yotei, make sure to check out our review.
All right, so there you have it. No, I'm not gonna join IGN or anything like that, but for the most part, other than what he was saying at the end regarding Intergalactic, nobody has any interest in that game. I shouldn't say nobody. That's a bit strong. Nobody. There I go again. I was gonna say nobody again. Most people don't have any interest in that game because the minute they saw a bald-headed woman walking around, it's like, oh boy, we get where this is going. We get where this is going. Saros did look promising, but it's just more the same from of Returnal. If you are a Returnal fan, you probably are like, yep, I want to play more of that. Returnal was not a bad game, but it was repetitive, and it got boring after a while. I still need to go back and play it just to get more familiar with it. I will probably pick up Saros, but that's for another video. But overall, that pretty much sums up everything with regards to what I have noticed about a lot of PlayStation games in this current generation. They tell the same story. They have, for the most part, the same themes, and they all look pretty. But at the end of the day, they become utterly forgettable. Like, how many people are really talking about Death Stranding 2 right now? Death Stranding 2 is not in the zeitgeist. It came, it went, people saw it, it's like, oh, that's fine. But no one's talking about it. Who's talking about God of War Ragnarok right now? Who's talking about Spider-Man 2? Which that game was an utter disappointment. How about Horizon Forbidden West? How about Ratchet and Clank Future? Nobody's talking about these games because they are boring and they pretty much have the same themes going throughout them. They're pretty to look at, but at the end of the day, they're utterly forgettable. And with Ghost of Yotei, no one's talking about this game other than the fact that we're trying to figure out, well, how many games did it sell? Somebody posted a fake number saying that it probably sold 1.3 million units, which everybody called bullshit on. The people that have been playing it said it's painfully mid, which is understandable because it's just a carbon copy of Ghost of Tsushima. It hasn't done really anything innovative. So yeah, that's pretty much the reason why I'm not going to be playing the game. I wanted to finish the story of Jin Sakai, but Sony and Sucker Punch decided to go take a detour and tell this story of revenge with using an angry butch woman, which is just tired and played. But those are my thoughts on the situation. What do you guys think about all of this? Have you guys bought Ghost of Yotei? Are you having fun with the game, or are you just going to skip it? Whatever your thoughts, jump down in the comments. Let me know what you think. And make sure you guys do like, share, subscribe, turn on the post notifications. All that stuff really does help me out. And remember, this is Chris Bolt signing off, and I will catch you guys in the next video. You guys take it easy.